Hey everybody, Aaron Blaise here, and I'm really excited to, first of all, introduce my good friend Dave Clayton, all the way over from England. And we just spent the week shooting a brand new course called Graphic Design for Artists and Illustrators. And it's specializing in an introduction to Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, which is book design. It's really exciting. So Dave has taken this whole week and shot this whole course, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so we covered the hidden treasures of Adobe Creative Cloud. We also looked at Photoshop, Illustrator and InDesign, but we looked at working with them together so we can take assets from one to the other. We made a ton of stuff in Photoshop, Illustrator. We made some typefaces, we made templates, we used color. We just dug right inside the software and see what we could pull out and make some really cool things for you. And the whole class is tailored for you. So there's none of the stuff in there that you won't need. These are all really cool things that you can use on a daily basis.
That's super cool. We're really excited about this new course. I can't wait for you guys to dig into it. Enjoy this sneak peek and then go on over to creatureartteacher.com where it's available now. Go on out there, put some beauty back into the world, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
Right, before we start using any of the Adobe software, I want to show you something that is really cool, and it's one of my favorite creative tools. Now, I've known the guys at Fontself for quite some time now, and I met them at Adobe Max. And way back, we'll drop an image in. I was actually able to create a typeface for one of my colleague, Glyn Dewis, who's a really accomplished photographer. He wrote a book, and it was called Photograph Like a Thief. And the whole idea of the book was around, you'll hear me talking about music analogies where when you learn something, like buying a guitar, you play other people's songs to learn how to master the tool. Then when you're confident, you start to create your own songs and tunes. And the same really applies in software. A good way to learn is to actually learn from existing photographers, designers, artwork, and you're going to see me using other artwork to create new artwork. But this one, we did this book, Photograph Like a Thief, and funnily enough, myself, Glyn and the publisher all came up with kind of the same idea, and it sounded like a Hitchcock movie, Photograph Like a Thief. And we all kind of had the same idea that it should look like, the book cover should look like a Hitchcock movie poster. And if you know Hitchcock movie posters, you know there's a very identifiable typeface they use. Now, the world of typefaces can be quite complicated. So what we've got to look at is if we want to create something that we're going to sell, that's going to make us money, and we're going to be using it commercially, we have to be able to use a commercial license. So when we look at Adobe fonts are available to Creative Cloud users commercially, so we can use any of the typefaces commercially. If we go to somewhere like websites that are called sort of fonts for free or dafont.com, quite often the versions they let you download are for personal use only, especially when you're looking for things like the Harry Potter font or you know, another kind of film franchise, Lord of the Rings. People tend to use them for fun, but when it becomes a commercial use, if that typeface has not been released commercially, or actually it belongs to someone and someone's kind of stolen it, you can't use it commercially. So what we did was I actually had to hand draw the whole alphabet, upper and lowercase, all of the numbers and all of the glyphs. And you'll see me use glyphs in this course moving forward. Glyphs are the things like the at sign, the and sign, ampersand, the exclamation mark, question mark. Anything that's not a letter or a number is considered a glyph. Now, you have all the ones on your keyboard, which are, you know, the brackets and the speech marks and everything. But actually, if you download the typeface and go to the glyphs panel, which we will look at, and you will see me use it in the course, there are alternative characters. And quite often these can be other language. So say French, there'll be letters with accents above them. There could be things like the trademark symbol, the copyright symbol, things that you'd have that you'd use that aren't necessarily on your keyboard. One of the most popular ones is the euro symbol, is not on a keyboard, just the pound, the British pound sign and the dollar. So you have all of these additional glyphs. Now, if you're going to be making typefaces, if you're really good, you'll not only make the upper and lowercase and the numbers, you will do a full set of glyphs and alternative characters. So getting back to the book, I had to hand draw this kind of Hitchcock looking typeface. We used it on the book cover. I then made some additional things that weren't glyphs. I made some additional graphics, which were small icons of the thief doing particular things. I drew some arrows and some call out and some speech bubbles, things that we could use that I could have actually put into the typeface, but we used them as assets. And we ended up laying out this book cover, and it was really cool. And when I did it, I needed a tool to be able to turn my hand-drawn letters in Adobe Illustrator into an actual typeface. And this is where Fontself came in. They actually started on Kickstarter a few years ago, got funded, and they made this lovely piece of software that's really easy to use that you're going to see. Now we'll jump onto the website quickly. It's fontself.com. And here you'll get some help files. There'll be some information on who they are, how to learn how to use it. They've got a blog, they've got a forum, they've got a help guide. Now it works on the desktop, and they've also got a really cool mobile version. We're not looking at the mobile version today. They can also create color fonts, which are SVG fonts. We're not looking at that today because that's going down a whole different rabbit hole. We're just looking at making a simple typeface that we can create ourselves or manipulate from something that exists, and it installs into our computer and we can use it on any software. Now Fontself is not free, but it is very reasonably priced. So if we just come over to the pricing here, and Fontself is available for both Illustrator and Photoshop. Now I personally prefer the Illustrator version, and the reason being is because Illustrator creates clean vector graphics, which means they're mathematically made. That means the sharp edges are sharp, the corners are corners. If you create something in Photoshop, when you zoom in, you start to see the small pixels. And I don't like that method. Now, text in Photoshop actually is vector. You can actually create vectors in Photoshop. And you will see later in the course, in the Photoshop course, I actually show you how to manipulate type, live type. We turn it into shapes, and then we're able to create, amend it like we would in Adobe Illustrator, where we can affect it. Now, we could do that in Photoshop, and then we could use the Photoshop bundle, the Photoshop part of the plugin. The Illustrator version is $39. There is no free trial. But the bundle is $59. So for the extra $20, you can get both versions, and it might be you'll be more comfortable. If you can afford it, I would say get both. But if not, just get the Illustrator version, and you'll be able to create all in Illustrator. That's my preferred use. So quite often, always check the website. They do actually do discounts sometimes. They've got a really good help desk as well. So if you've got any problems with it, but all you do is you purchase it, you download it, they'll send you a license key, install it into your preferred software, in our case Adobe Illustrator, and then I'm going to show you in Illustrator where to find it, and then we'll start creating some typefaces, and I'll show you how to use it. So let's come away from the website and let's go back into Adobe Illustrator. Okay, we're in Adobe Illustrator, so where is Fontself? Well, to find it, once you've installed it, it'll open up and it'll ask you to put your license key in so that it knows you're an active user, and it's going to locate itself under Window Extensions. And if we look over here, you can see I've actually got quite a few extensions. We are going to be looking at plugins and what these are further down the line in this course, but for now all you need to know is it sits in here, and it's called Fontself Maker 3.5.8 at the moment. That's the current version. So if I click on that, what it's going to do is open up a panel, and the panel matches everything else that's in Adobe Illustrator, so it doesn't look out of place. It will actually dock with the other panels, which I show you how to do when we do the Illustrator part of the course and we look at the workspace and how to create workspaces. But just for now, we've got this panel, and you can see I've already been using it because I use it quite often and obviously been practicing for this course. And it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to show you really easy how it is to create different types of typefaces. So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to create a brand new typeface, or a new font. Now, I've mentioned this later on in the course, the word font and the word typeface. It does create some argument. It's a bit like aluminium and aluminum. It's not pronunciation, it's more what it is. So a typeface is the thing we create. It's what it calls. So if I create one now, which I'm going to show you as an example, this typeface will be called Aaron Blaise because he drew it out. If I make, excuse me, if I then make variations of that, so we have, say, maybe if you look in your fonts panel, sometimes you'll see that you'll pick, say, Myriad. Myriad has Myriad light, regular, medium, italic, condensed, bold, heavy, super heavy. You get multiple styles. That's the font created from the typeface. So throughout the course, I'll say typeface, I'll say font. What I mean is the letters that we're going to use, but it's a good thing to understand that that's what it is. The typeface is the style, the font is how it's applied. So what we're going to do is we're just going to be creating one style. We're going to be creating one font in Fontself. So to do this, we just click new. And what we're going to say is we're going to create a new font or a new style from the current font. We just want to create a new font. A new style will be amending something that we've already created. So say we maybe do the letters and we decide we want to add the numbers. But for now, we're doing a nice, clean, new font. So I'm just going to click on that, and we now get our empty window. That means Fontself is now ready for us to do some work. I'm just going to dock this out of the way and just pop it up here for now. And if we just come back to camera, earlier I said to Aaron, hey, look, I'm going to be doing this part of the course with Fontself. It's really cool. Could you just get a sheet of paper and could you just write out it with a Sharpie, A to Z in uppercase, A to Z in lowercase, and 0 to 9 for numbers. So that's what he's done. He's written out this really nice typeface that we're going to use. Now, what all you need to do is really simply to get it into Adobe Illustrator. The thing I recommend is get your camera, get your phone. I just did mine on my phone. Try and get the piece of paper in nice clean light with no shadows. What we don't want is shadows on the paper itself, because the thing is with software, it sees dark, it sees light. We don't want it to see any dark other than the letters on the paper. So try and hold it up. I took my photograph outside. I had no shadow outside in the hot Orlando sun that's burning me to a crisp, and I'm getting bitten as well. Took it outside, photographed it, brought it in. Now you can, if it's not quite clean enough, obviously you can go into something like Adobe Photoshop and you can use brightness and contrast. You can probably even edit it in your phone and just brighten it so the blacks are black and the what should be white becomes whiter. Because what we're looking for here is the contrast. We want to take the black letters and turn them into a vector, and we want to lose the white. So the cleanest file you can get, the better. I'm not going to show you how to do that because that's a completely different thing. But essentially, if we jump back into the computer, we can see now that I've got this bunch of letters and numbers that Aaron very kindly drew out. I said to him I deliberately wanted it to be rough because I want it to look handwritten. I want it to look like it's been done with a pen. And there's a few things we need to understand to turn this into a typeface. So the first thing is to be able to load it into Fontself. When you create your characters, you have to have them in a full line A to Z. You can't have a second line, as you can see now, where we've got it goes A to R, then S to Z. and in the lowercase. We have to have the letters all in one line because that's the way we bring them into Fontself. If we don't, it causes some confusion. You'll get some warnings. It's just not good practice. So the best thing to do, and the only way to do it, is to do it this way. Now I've imported the image in, and at the moment, that's all it is. It's an image. We need to turn this into some vector shapes before we can bring it into Fontself. So to do this, there's a tool in Adobe Illustrator and it's called Image Trace. So all I need to do with the image selected is look at our options. So we have things like high fidelity photos. So say it's a very detailed graphic you bring in and you want pretty much all of it to be vectorized. It's very messy. It's not a preferred option I'd go for in using Adobe Illustrator because it can actually drain your system and you get the beach ball and it's hanging. We can go for low fidelity photo. The things for things like this are looking for maybe 3 colors, black and white logo, sketched art, silhouettes. You can try it, you can see what it looks like. If you don't like it, you can just Command Z, go back, try another one. So what I'm going to do is try, let's have a look at sketched art. Now it warns me that because there's a lot of artwork here, it could take a little while to do it. It actually doesn't take that long. So I'm just going to click OK. And what it's going to do now is go through and see how quick that was. It's actually turned this into a vector response. So I just want the black parts of it. So I'm just quickly going to come over here and go to the image trace options, and I'm just going to click on advanced because what I want to do is ignore the color white. Because I took a white piece of paper and black text, it's going to scan everything, but it's going to leave the white in the background. So I'm going to say ignore the color. I'm going to click on the eye picker, just select that color and say anything that's that, just ignore. Then I'm just going to close that down. And then before we do anything else, we've got the selection, we have to expand it. So I'm just going to click expand, and what that's going to do is turn that into vectors. The way to see if that's happened and make sure it's not type is Command Y. If we click Command Y, we can see that this is now vector artwork, and you can see that by the amount of points on the letters. Now, good practice is the least amount of points you have, the cleaner the artwork's going to be. Now, there are some tools out there. One of them that you'll hear me mention in this course is Astute Graphics. They have a really cool tool for cleaning up artwork, but also Adobe Illustrator has one called Simplify. So what we could do is go Object, Path, and we can go to Simplify. And what it will do is it will just give that artwork a little bit of a clean up and remove some of those points that we don't need. You can actually adjust this and say, like, take away as many points as possible, or you can actually leave as many points as possible. The more you take away, you're going to lose the actual, like the fidelity of the letters. They're not going to be how you set them out to be. It's going to make a lot of changes. So I'm just going to Command Y back. The next thing we need to do is it's currently grouped. It's grouped everything together. So what we want to do is we're just going to get rid of this up here, and I'm going to go to Object, and I'm going to go to Ungroup. And what that means now is I can select each letter individually. So as I mentioned, let's just zoom out. And what we need to do is put the A to Z in a line. So I'm just going to select these letters here. I'm going to bring them up to round about here. And I'm just going to add a ruler in. I just want to look at the alignment of these letters. So we can adjust this in Fontself, but it's just good practice just to eyeball it so you can see how that alphabet is going to look if you were to type it out. So if you click Command R, that's going to bring the rulers up the top here. And if you just click and drag down below the letters, you'll get a line. And you can see here that the A is sitting on the blue line, but by the time we get to the Z, it's actually a little bit higher up. So all I'm going to do is just use the alignment tool, and I'm just going to say for the moment, sit at the bottom like so. Now a couple of the letters I just need to manually adjust is I want the left leg of that R to come down, and I want the bottom of the Q to come down, and I'm also going to bring that G down as well. Like I said, we can adjust it when we get into Fontself, but it's just good practice to just eyeball it and see how you think it might look when you're actually typing it out in a document. So we can do some manual adjustments. When we're done, we've got our A to Z. We can then work on the lowercase. So I'm just going to bring those over. I'm just going to quickly do the same thing, bring down a line, and I'm going to select everything, and then I'm just going to pop it on that baseline. In fact, no, we want it a little bit higher than that. We're going to go centered for now. Again, this will require some adjustments. So if we just look through these letters, let's have a look. We've got a little bit of a problem with an I there. So let's just zoom in and let's just drag that I back on the top because we want that to look like so. We've got a rogue I here, so we can get rid of that. So say just tidy these up first, and we can adjust them when we bring into Fontself. I'm just going to do one more round of that, and then let's bring that Q down. I'm just going to bring that P down a little bit and bring that Y. Let's do the G. So we've got A, B, C, D. That looks okay. Like I said, we can adjust it afterwards. And finally, we'll just do those numbers. We'll just pop them down like so. So now we've done the first part. We've brought in our letters. We've cleaned it up. What we need to do now is bring this into Fontself. So we'll go and open our panel, and we'll just undock it, and we'll close everything else. So what we're going to do is we are going to click and drag our first bunch of letters into Fontself. So let's just pull it down like so. So we're going to select everything, A to Z. So like I said, they've got to be ungrouped. They've got to be individual characters. They've got to be lined up A to Z in a single line. When we drag this onto the panel, Fontself is automatically going to go, hey, this looks like a capital A to Z. But if it isn't, you can drag it down and drop it onto the regular A to Z. It knows it's not numbers. The reason being is because we've selected 26 letters. If you haven't selected 26 letters, Fontself will let you know that you haven't brought in a whole alphabet. It also knows that 26 letters is higher than 10, which is required from 0 to 9. So it's not going to let you drop it into that. The last one is any character batch, which can be letters and numbers, accents, punctuation. This is what we refer to as the glyphs. These are the extra letters outside of the general alphabet. What we're going to do is drop it in the actual A to Z. So just drop it onto the block, release. Fontself Maker is going to now look at the letters, it's going to import them, and it's automatically going to understand, because they were in the right order, it's going to place them in the right order in Fontself. So if we just drag this up so we can see everything there, we can see a live preview. So we've got our A to Z here. And if we come down, we can see that we've got our letters automatically lined up. Not only that, they're also already labeled A through to Z. So if we just come down and check that, it's always good to go through and check this just to make sure there aren't any errors. Now, the next thing to do, like I said, is we've got to think about how our text sits on that, what we call a baseline. And that's, imagine a ruled piece of paper. When you write along that ruled piece of paper, you have certain parts of the letter come underneath, come below the line, and some stay on the line. So we can actually make some manual adjustments. So for example, I'm just going to bring the A down a little bit. I'm just going to bring that B down, and I'm just going to go through and make some slight adjustments to the letters just to make sure that they look exactly where I want them to be. I'm just going to adjust that N and pop it down a little bit. Let's check everything else. That Q could come down, and I think we could probably move that W as well. X, Y, Z, let's bring that one down. That looks okay, and I might just bring that Z down. So again, it's a handwritten typeface, so we don't want it to be absolutely precise, like if we were creating Helvetica or any, like Myriad, any of the kind of more professional daily use fonts, they have to be super specifically done. Now, they probably wouldn't use Fontself, they'll use a higher end product called Glyphs. So if you're into making typography and that's a world you want to get into, I'd start learning in Fontself, but if you're going to be looking at selling high-end typefaces, I'd be looking at something like glyphs or above. For now, we're just having some fun. We're just using some basic handwritten text. So we've created our A to Z. Now that we've done that, we want to add the rest of our letters. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to click on my A to Z lowercase. Let's just pull this up here. I'm then going to click and drag straight onto Fontself. It's going to go back to the selection. We know this time we want to do lowercase. So I'm going to drop that on. It's going to import the letters. So we'll just go through and wait for that to render. We'll just come down here and check. So we're starting with A lowercase and we'll go through to Z lowercase. So again, we're just going to go through quickly and make sure that we've got the letters where they want to sit. So that G's got to come down. Let's see what else we've got here. We've got J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q. Let's bring that P down. We've got the Q there. R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. I think that looks just about okay. And then finally, we're going to bring in these numbers. So we're going to click and drag. And we know this time, Fontself said, hey, 10 characters. That means you've got your 0 to 9, or hopefully your 0 to 9. So let's drop that inside. Let's import those. Now, another thing that's important to know, your 0 must come first. So you do 0 through to 9. Don't do 1 to 9 and 0 at the end. The reason being is when you bring it into Fontself, the number 1 will go in the place for 0. So that means if you don't concentrate and you don't come and check this, when you go to install this font and you start using it and you're going to say type 2023, you're actually going to be typing 3134 because the numbers are out of line. So that's what I say, always go in and check. Now we've got a warning here, so let's just have a look and see what that is. Your font has one potential issue. Some glyphs descend too low. So to fix it, check G and P. So let's just close that down. I think our numbers are all right. So G and P. So let's come down here. So yeah, G's a little bit too low. So we're gonna, if you can just see there was a line that appeared. And that was to tell us once we've gone past it, we may be a little bit too low. So you can see there we've got that warning sign. So I'm just going to bring that up to about there. And the other one was P. So let's come down here and let's bring P up and we lose the warning sign. So no warning signs, that's good. So now we've got capital A to Z, lowercase A to Z or Z, and we've also got our numbers. So now that we've done that, we've got two options. We can save this font and save it in a location, which I always recommend anyway as a backup, because we may want to pass this on to someone else to use. You may even want to sell it. So first thing we're going to do is let's save it. We're going to have a panel come up that says what we're going to call it. So I'm going to call it Aaron Blaise letters, and we've got only letters, numbers, and 20 characters max. So I think we're okay. In fact, let's remove the word letters. Let's just use Aaron Blaise. And we're going to click OK. It's then going to ask me where do I want to save it. So I'm just going to save it on my desktop for now and click save. And that's going to tell me that I've saved it, and then I can go off, find that, double click it and install it like you would install any other typeface that you've downloaded. But what's cool about Fontself is we can install the typeface immediately. What we need to do is come down here to install. It's only going to install it for Illustrator. We're using the version for Illustrator, but actually we can still install the typeface, and it can be used in Word and Excel and presentation software, Keynote, PowerPoint. For what we can do now is just install it here. So I'm going to click install, and it says your font Aaron Blaise was just installed. You can now find it in your character panel inside, or you can go and browse the installation folder, which is where all your fonts are kept. So let's test this. Let's just dock this out of the way quickly, pop it over there. And let's just get our type tool. I'm going to come down here and set the type tool, and let's just set it up to 72. Let's go a little bit higher. Let's go 120. Next thing we're going to do, I'm just going to change the color just so we can see the differentiation between the two. So let's pick bright red. And what we want to do now is, with that selected, we're going to go and look for a font called Blaise. So let's type in Aaron, and we can see there we've got typeface called Blaise. So let's click on that. And if we look down here, we just expand it. We've got lorem ipsum. Let's just type over the top. We've got capitals now. So let's type lorem ipsum. And that's coming out fine. We've got the uppercase. Let's just actually change that back to Aaron Blaise letters. And let's make a copy of it. We're going to come down here. We're going to highlight that. We're going to do lowercase Aaron Blaise letters. And let's just do one more and check this and make sure that we've got our numbers. So we'll do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's it. It's as simple as that. So once you've mastered the initial setup, because like anything, good planning and preparation prevents poor performance. It's not easy to say if you're drunk, which I'm not. But yeah, do that planning, do that preparation. And then once you've got used to that part of it, you can then start being really creative. Now, just to kind of add to this so that we can kind of go over some bits again, we've created that. Let's just go over to a second file that I've got here. Now, what we did there was we got Aaron to type out some letters, which is great if you want to do something handwritten. But let's say we want to use something we've downloaded. Now, when we look at Adobe Stock, we can see that we can type in a typeface or font. And what it will do is it will give you like maybe an A to Z. It might not always give you the lowercase or the numbers, but it will just give you some letters that you can be creative with. So what I did was I went on and found some vector files for letters, and I thought, okay, let's test it. Let's see how it works. Now, there is a bit of a tricky thing here, because we're essentially creating a typeface that's from letters that were commercially available. There is a grey area where people kind of think that if you take letters that were created as shapes for commercial use, what you're doing is you're creating something different with that artwork that wasn't in the licensing. So always check the license to make sure that you can actually turn it into a font if you're looking to sell it or use it commercially. But if it's just for fun, if it's just for creating personal projects, you're going to be absolutely okay. But ultimately, this is what the software is for. So I'm just going to pick a couple out of this, because you are going to see me use one of these later on in the tutorials. But I'm just going to take one of these and show you again, repeat what we're going to do, check that it works, and then you can go ahead and pick a whole bunch of different typefaces, either download them or handwritten, or just one last one I'll show you at the end is where we can actually take a font that's on our system already, we can apply a slight effect to it, and then we can add that typeface back in as an additional option to the typeface that's in the system. Now again, licensing, I would suggest only do things like this for personal projects, but obviously always check the licensing for the fonts or with the Foundry. But just for fun, let's do this first one. I got this really cool typeface here that has got an uppercase and lowercase, but for speed, we'll use this top one that's just A to Z. I'm going to open Fontself Maker, just drag the panel down. I'm going to go new, because we want to create a brand new font. I'm going to drag the letters, bring it over the top to A to Z. It's going to import them all in. Now this one I deliberately want to be kind of all over the place, because it's a very clunky, organic, handwritten font. So I don't necessarily want the letters to be kind of all on the baseline. I want them to be a little off center. So what we can do is actually move them away from the norm. So bring some of these away from the actual baseline, just to make them kind of a little bit all over the place. So let's just go through. Happy with this. Okay, that looks good. And then what we'll do is we'll choose install. We can save it. I'm not going to bother this time because this one's just for fun. I'm going to call it install, and I'm going to call it big fat letters, like so. And I'm going to click OK. And it says your font big fat letters was just installed. So let's dock our panel. Let's go and check that theory. So I'm just going to raise that above there. I'm going to come over to the type tool. I'm going to click here. We're going to go back to 120 size, and I'm going to type up here big fat letter. There you go, big fat letters. Click on that, and then I'm going to type big fat Fontself letters. And we can see there that we've got this nice, really cool kind of artistic font. It's got some, you know, large characters, small characters. It's kind of all over the place, but that's how quick it is to take something and turn it into a typeface. Now, just going to show you one more quick tip, and that's where we talked about taking a typeface and amending it. So I've got this one here, and it's called Nove. You're going to see me using this typeface later on in the Illustrator course, but I kind of wanted to show you the fun you can have in Illustrator with this. So I took the typeface, I then expanded it. So when you've typed something out, you go up to type, and then you do create outlines, and that turns it from a live font into just basic shaped letters, because that's what we need. We're bringing vectors into Fontself to turn it back into a font. So what I then did was I took the letters and I went into effect, and I went to distort and transform, and I picked roughen. And what that does is it roughens up the letters. So if we just, let's just come out of that and let's zoom in so we can see a bit more what we're doing. Let's just pull it over to the A there. So I've got them all selected, effect, and then we're going to go to distort and transform and roughen. Now that's a little bit too much for me at the moment. I'm going to make it a little bit smoother. I'm just going to bring that detail back. You can actually put a setting in here. We've got it at 5%. Let's just make that 1% for the moment. And let's just bump that up to 2. We just want to see it enough that it's making effect. So you can see there, what we've done is we've roughened that text up a little bit. So it's a slightly different, more organic version of the original typeface. So I think we'll stick for that for now. And you can see there we've got these letters, they're just slightly different. The next thing I like to do is, just for cleanliness, we're just gonna come all the way back here. So what we're going to do is, because we've applied an effect to the letters, we don't want that effect to be attached to them right now. We want to actually clean it up. So what we do is we go to Object, Expand Appearance, and just one more time, Object, Expand. And then now if we zoom back in, these are now just individual letters. And if we do Command Y, we can see again, we've got our outlines to show that it's an actual vector piece of artwork. Let's just come back here. Let's Command Y to come back over to Fontself Maker. We're going to do new, brand new font. And we're just going to select all of these. Let's just drag them up here so we can see what we're doing. And then we're going to drag them into A to Z, put it into Fontself Maker. It's going to import it. We'll look through, we can see we've got all the letters there. We can just again adjust that baseline, and then we can go ahead and we'll do install, and we'll call it Dave Roughen, and we'll click OK, and then we'll move Fontself up out of the way like so. We're going to come over to our type tool, and now it's already in Nove, so we're going to go to Dave Roughen, and then we're going to type out Dave Roughen in Fontself, and let's just drag that out like so. So there we've got an alternative to that particular typeface Nove. It means we can just be a little bit more creative. You'll see me later on in the course creating some posters and artwork. And if you want to do something just a little bit different, again, you can say take that. If we're working in the same type family, but we've maybe got an option that we need we haven't got, you can always just create something like this and just use Fontself to make a slight variation on an existing font. So that's Fontself in a nutshell. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of this tool. There's going to be a link in the notes for the class where you can go off and find Fontself and purchase it. I'd love it if you do buy it, if you could just tell them Dave sent you, because they're a very small company, like 3 guys, I think, trying to run this business, and they say they've been going for a few years. They're lovely guys. They're based in France. They make a really good product, and I would just love to support them as much as possible. So you guys buying the software to help you be more creative, if you can afford it, is going to be really helpful. So that's Fontself. I hope you've enjoyed it. Now we've got that, we can move on, and we're going to be looking at the rest of the Adobe Creative Suite. So let's jump into the next bit of the class. Right, one of the fun things about being friends with someone like Aaron Blaise, and also things in Photoshop, is if you don't already know, Aaron sells loads of packs of brushes. And I remember a few years ago, I was on a photo walk, a Scott Kelby photo walk, and a friend of mine took a photograph of me in front of a sign, "Resident Dogs Only, No Fouling." And I squatted down, I folded my arms and took this picture looking kind of all mean and moody. And Aaron has this wonderful set of brushes, and the next thing I received in my email a couple of days later was this picture you can see in Photoshop, where he'd actually given me lovely grey lion mane hair. It's such good fun messing around in Photoshop, and I know we've been showing a bunch of serious stuff and cool business tips and things, but do you know what, have fun in Photoshop. Just quite often I just open up a photograph, a graphic, and I just think, what can I do with this that I hadn't thought about? So I go through and I look at maybe bringing textures, changing the color. Now, as I said, there's one thing I very deliberately not shown in any of these classes, and that is the thing that everyone's talking about, generative AI. It's not something I felt we needed to cover on this occasion, because I think I'm very much in a frame of mind that, like I said, I want us to learn the skills that we have control over. I don't want to use something that I don't really have control over. So at the moment, I'm not bringing in generative AI, I'm not bringing in AI assets. We're talking about things that we control, we make, and that we can handle and create in Photoshop. But I do highly recommend practicing. Open an image and, you know, test yourself, push yourself, and see if there's something you've never done before, you've never experimented with before, that you want to try. And maybe doing something, manipulating an image, even doing some compositing, like maybe take a drawing that you've done and bring it into an image in Photoshop, place it inside, but then look at trying to, you know, develop it, put it into the scenery, like those great cartoons like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, for example, is where you've got animation in real life. So bring one of your animations into a photo of real life, and just using some cutouts, like if you've got to cut out the foreground or add some elements in to give some depth, put a bit of shadow maybe, add some effects, change the tonality of it, some lighting, and try and make your animations, your animation characters fit into real life scenarios. It's always good fun to just test Photoshop and see what you can do. So what we're going to do is move on and do some more creative stuff. And one of the things that I really love as a designer is not just creating things, but thinking, I wonder what that looks like if it was on a t-shirt, or if it was in a poster or on a hat or something. So there's something we can now get in Adobe stock, freepik.com, freepik.com, because I've got an account with them. There's a few other places that do mock-ups. What a mock-up is somebody's actually taken a scene, a scenario, and what they've done is they've done all of the work to make a file that we open up, and it has a layer structure, and you're going to see this in a second. And what it allows us to do is to place our logos and images into these mock-ups to see what they look like in real life. A lot of graphic designers use these, so quite often you'll see a graphic designer has come up with a concept and they'll post images of maybe business cards, a business card mock-up, t-shirts, hats, shop signs, bus stops, the sides of buses and trucks. None of it's real. It's all just mock-ups, but what it does is it sells the idea, and it enables you to not just have to try and think about what something looks like, but you can actually visualize it. You can see it in front of you. I wonder what this would look like on. So what we're going to do is look at some mock-ups. Now, these ones I've got from both Adobe stock and from Freepik, and all they are is just some simple things that we're going to add some artwork to. So the first one here, let's just zoom in here. We've got this really nice blue t-shirt and we've got this really cool logo on the front. But I'm sort of thinking, I wonder what one of those snow bear logos we created would look like on a t-shirt. The cool thing about these that I really love is, like I said, it's the work that's been done in the layers to make this easy for us. So I can see here that if I click on the layers, we can see we've got a design, which is here, and we've got a tag, which is here. So what I want to do is go in and change the design. And this is where we're going to learn something called smart objects. So a smart object is if we create a file. So let's say we open up and create a file and we paste something into that, and then we add another layer and another layer. A smart object is, think of it like a zip file. So what you do is you would select all the things you want to keep together. Now what I do if I'm doing maybe a type treatment is I place my type and I right click the layer. So if we just right click the layer, we've got convert to smart object. What that does is it creates a file, kind of a layer within the layer. So it will take my live text. So say we've typed out snow bear. Then what I can do is convert that to a smart object. And what that does is it takes the layer with the live text and it saves it and kind of puts it in a special little layer hidden inside. So you can still see the text, but then what happens is, let's say I want to apply an effect to it. So maybe add a texture or add some kind of like maybe a stroke or something to do with color. Now the beautiful thing about it being a smart object is then I can go back and I can do some work on it. So just to give you an idea, if I just open up do new, I'll just do a custom size document. And what I'm going to do is just add some type here. So let's just type snow bear. Okay, and we'll just move the layer panel over to the side for a second, and I'm just going to expand this. So if you see here on the right hand side, I'm going to commit that, and I'm just going to go here and change this to a smart object. So convert to smart object. What that's done now is it's captured it and saved it. Let's say I'm going to put something on top of this now. So let's come down here to the effects panel and let's add a stroke. So let's change the color of that stroke so we can see it really clearly. Let's go up to here, a nice bright pink so we can see what's happening. So what I've got here is a snow bear with a stroke. So let's do something else to this now. Let's just bring in an image and let's put that image on the top. And what I'm going to do is, this is another really good little tip. You're going to see this in a minute. I'm going to show you this, but just for the sake of showing this, I'm just going to commit that place. I've placed it in, committed it. I'm just going to clip it. I will show you how to do this. I'm just going to clip that image and bring that mount in. So our type has now got a stroke and it's got an image placed inside it. Now at the moment I can't change that text. Now I could do multiple things with this, but what we've done is we've protected the original text layer, which means we can still go in and change that. So if I double click on my smart object, my snow bear text will open up. Let's click and let's change that, and we'll just type in Clayton like so. And we're going to go ahead, and when we click on the X, what it's going to do is ask us to save it. We don't have to save it anywhere. What it's doing is saying, oh, okay, you've made a change to smart objects. I know where to put it back. So we'll click on that. We're going to save it. When we come back to our document, I didn't have to change anything. All my effects, all the things I've done on top of it are still there. It just means I can change the element within the smart object. And it doesn't have to be text, it can be anything. What you'll do is you go in and you'll change the smart object and it'll update onto the image. So if we come back over here to our t-shirt, what we've got here is our design. So I'm going to double click on that and we can see that Chroma Tees logo. If I just move in closer there, we can see that. But what I want to do is actually add one of my logos. So I'm going to go File. I'm going to come down to Place Embedded. Now the difference between Place Embedded and Linked. Place Embedded means when you put it into the PSD file, you're putting it straight in. It's going to live there. It's not connected to anything else in the outside world. But if you place Linked, that means what's going to happen is if you ever edit that original graphic, maybe change a color from black to red, where that image is linked into your document, it's going to update that as well. And you might not necessarily realize that you've made that change, and it's going to maybe change something you've forgotten about. So I tend to place in Photoshop, I place embedded. You will see in the InDesign course that when we place images into InDesign, they are always linked, and that's the best method. But for Photoshop, I place embedded unless I specifically need to know that if I've created a whole bunch of files, maybe using a logo, and I know that, oh, I need to use a different logo for that, I can go in, I can update the logo, and then it will update across all of the graphics. So that's where linked comes into play. But when you save the file and give it to someone else, unless you embed that logo, then they won't have the link to the image. So that's just the reason why you have file embedded and file linked. So I'm just going to get my Snow Bear circle logo, and I'm just going to click and place that in there. Now we know on the t-shirt we had kind of very specific place in the middle, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce the size of that and just pop it so that it kind of covers that area. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the artwork from underneath. Then what I'm going to do is I'm then going to click the X. That's going to save the Photoshop document for the logo. And what that's going to do is it's saved that smart object and it's placed it into the t-shirt. And if we zoom in, look how cool that looks. You would think that that t-shirt had been printed. Now, if we thought, oh, actually, do you know what? That's a little bit too big in the middle. I wonder what it looks like on another part of the t-shirt. So if we just double click there, what we can do is we can come over to the right hand side. Let's just reduce the size of that. And let's just, now this is a little bit kind of, let's see how it's going to look. I'm just going to move it up into the corner like so. And I'm just going to close that. Did we close it? Oh, we have to commit the placement. Then we're going to close it, save it, go back to the t-shirt. It's actually gone too high. So let's just do that one more time. Pull it down here. Let's try that. Bring it round about here. Commit that, close it. It's all about experimentation, seeing how something looks. Almost there, we got it almost right. We'll just do one more. Let's just move it across like so. Let's just close it, save it. That's better. So look how cool that looks. It looks like the logo has actually been printed right on top of the t-shirt, and we've got all the folds and creases. So if you were to send that to someone and say, hey, I'm releasing my new brand of Snow Bear merchandise, even on the tag, if we go into the tag, we can double click on the tag, we can go file, we'll go back to place embedded, we'll go back to our circle vector, Snow Bear circle, place it, click OK. We're going to lose the underside one. We're just going to make that a little bit smaller like so. Just commit that, hitting enter, close that file, save, go back to our t-shirt, and now if we zoom in, we can even see not only is the texture of the t-shirt showing through, we've now got our logo actually on the tag as well. And if you didn't know any better, you would think that that existed and someone had taken a photograph. So that's a really good way of using mockups to do merchandise. The next one here is maybe you want to do an actual poster design and you want to see what would my poster look like inside of a frame. So again, we can just, we'll come over here to, I'm just going to come over to my files and I'm going to drag in, what image should we pull in here? Let's just pull, just give me a second. I'll just pull in, where's my image? Why did I not put my image yet? Let's bring in Snow Bear. So, okay, before we bring that in, what I'm going to do is come down here and I can see in the layers, I've got one called poster design. That's where my poster is going to sit. So I'm going to double click on the smart object. I'm going to bring in my image of Snow Bear. Now, the problem is the Snow Bear may not be the right size to fit in. We've actually got a border at the top and bottom. Now, because the Snow Bear image, the text comes to the edge, I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to stretch that out like so. We'll lose the Snow Bear and we'll just have the bear himself with no text. So we'll just commit that. And then once I've saved it, I'm just going to close that file, click save. It's going to come back to our mockup and we can see now we've got a frame, a mock-up of a frame with our picture. So if we were going to sell prints, we could see what that looked like. I think that's really cool. Another cool one that I really like is sometimes you want that kind of grungy effect and you want to see what your poster would look like out in the street. So again, this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click, come into the poster area. Now here we've got some type we can change and we've also got where we can put the artwork. So let's just come into the type and we'll just put in, let's go, we'll just type in Snow Bear for now. But what I'm going to do is turn the other piece of type. I'm going to turn the other two layers off. So all I'll do now is I'll bring in this PSD. I'm going to drop it inside here and I'm just going to make that image bigger again. Let's just get rid of the text. Now I had got the PSD of this where I could have taken the text out, but for now, let's just do it for mock-up purposes. Let's pull him over to the left-hand side, get Aaron's signature in the bottom. I'm happy with that. I'm going to commit the file. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to save it. And then when we go back to our poster mock-up, it's really cool because it looks like it's got all the creases and kind of all the shadow from where it would be pasted on something but not quite right, like a billboard poster on the side of a wall. So that's the kind of mock-up you can use if you want to create some like grungy graphics. Last one here is a cap mock-up. And what I want to do is actually put in the logo here on the cap. So I'm just going to double click on that. We know that it lives here on the bottom. So I'm just going to go File, Place Embedded. And we'll come down to our Snow Bear circle, Place. Just click OK there. We know we need to make it a bit smaller. So we know it's going to sit on the cap in the center around about there. And we're just going to commit that by hitting enter. I'm going to hide the one underneath. Then I'm going to click on that, save it, go back to our cap. And now our cap has got our logo placed on it. and it's kind of twisted proportionally. We could obviously go back in, make that a little bit bigger. So we would just click on the smart object. I would just make that slightly bigger, like so. Just move it up a tad. Commit that, close that file. Let's commit that again, close that file, save it, go back to the cap, and we can see there that the cap not only has it on the front, but we can see the material from the cap coming through. So it looks like it's actually been printed on the cap. So this is the really cool thing about using mockups, is we can take the artwork that we've created and we can show people what it would look like in real life. So let's just move on to the next graphic. So this is less of a mock-up and more of a treatment. So with our snow bear image, what we can also do is apply textures to our images to give them a different kind of look. So what I've done here is I've got two textures I'm going to use. One was a folded piece of paper. So what you can do is just get a piece of paper, fold it up into like 8 pieces, do it a couple of times so you get all those creases and shadows in there. Then you can scan it, take a photograph, import it into your computer, or you can go to a stock site and download one there. So if I just turn this blank piece of paper on, come back up here, I'm going to change the blend mode, which allows images to blend through to the image underneath. So what I've got here is a piece of folded paper. Now what I want to do is make it look like the poster underneath has also been folded. So all I need to do is change the blend mode. Now when we click at the top in the blend mode, as we click through each one, we actually get a live preview of what it's going to look like. So let's just come down, darken, multiply. We can see some of those folds coming through, and you can just go through and check each one, and you think, okay, maybe that's the one I want. Some obviously don't work because the blend is working differently. But as we start to go through, we can see, okay, which ones are going to be really good. Some are a little bit too funky, but if we go back up the top here, I quite like this linear burn, and that gives me the effect of that paper kind of coming through folded. Now I can leave that as it is. I could maybe even add a second texture. So this time what I've done was I found a graphic, a vector graphic that was of kind of a like a stained or wiped away, worn away, and I wanted it round the edge of the poster. So if we just come here to the smart object, I'm just going to come up here to normal blend mode, and what it was is it was just a black vector. So we're going to come back here to our white paper. I'm going to come back down to where were we? We were on I think it was hard light. Can't remember which one it was now. We'll go up to multiply for now. Then I've added a second texture to it. So what I wanted to do with the second texture is I want to create an effect. So what I wanted to do was come down and come to divide. And what that's going to do is it's going to flip the black to the white. So I wanted my image to not only have kind of folded paper texture, I wanted it to look like it was rough around the edges. So select divide. If I want to, I can also drop the opacity so it's not too harsh. So we can drop it down to around, I don't know, 60% there. So it looks like some of it's worn away, but not too harsh on there. And this is like the really cool thing of using textures, is you can get a texture from anywhere. If you're walking around, I went to the beach the other day and I took a load of wood textures, got them on my phone. I load them into a file on Dropbox. And then occasionally if I'm doing some like signage or something and someone says, what would it look like on a wooden fence? I've got some wooden textures. Just place them into your document, and then you can just use a blend mode and you can cycle through and see what looks good. Another really cool effect we can do is paste into a vector. So we've created a Photoshop document, and what I did was I opened up Illustrator, I copied a vector, I went to Photoshop and I pasted into Photoshop. You can also file, place an Illustrator file into Photoshop. It just behaves like a layer. But what you can do here is you can use these solid vector shapes as kind of like a frame. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually place an image into the vector. So what I did was I actually got an image here. Let me just undo that. So I got an image that Aaron had sent me. It was from the Snow Bear collection. And what I wanted to do was get the image into the shape of the bear. So we had like a combined effect. So I file, place, embedded, or I just click and drag from Finder, make sure it's on the above layer. And then what we do is, you remember when we were making logos, we used a clipping mask. So we clipped one thing into another. What we're going to do here is a similar thing. To do this, as long as you have the image above the shape or the vector, what we need to do is hold your cursor in between the two layers and hold down the Alt Option key. If you look at the cursor, you'll see it will change from a hand into like a little box with an arrow, which is kind of saying this will go into that. So if we click, what that does is it places that image and it clips it, masks it inside that shape. So then what I did was I kind of manipulated it around. I wanted the bear to kind of be walking through the top part of the bear. So we had the scenery, just click OK. And we can see here in the shape, we've got, the shape is the frame, but I've got a really cool picture of the snow bear kind of walking down a hill. So that's a really cool way of bringing images into vectors and using those as frames. And they're really good elements that you can put into poster designs or social media designs. The same thing actually works with text. So if we just come into this file here, what I've done is I've typed the word snow bear. It's live text. And what I wanted to do is I placed an image in the background. I put my text layer in the front. And what I wanted to do was then apply another image inside the text. And we use the same method again. I've brought in an image that Aaron gave me. And what I wanted to do is use this kind of green from the Aurora Borealis. Do the same thing again. Hold the cursor in between the letters. Hold the Option key down. Click clip. And then what we can do is if we click on the image, we can actually start to move it around. We can resize it. So if we just zoom out and I resize the image, we can get that kind of green in the background. Click OK, zoom back in, and you can see now that we've actually placed an image inside the text, and it's another really cool little effect that we can do. So that's fun in Photoshop. We've covered quite a lot there. We've gone from social media graphics through to special effects, using mockups, using vectors and text. Honestly, there is so much that we could do in Photoshop, but for now, I just wanted to show you the things that I think you can use immediately to start creating really cool graphics and assets for your project. I said maybe another time there'll be another course where we'll do some more additional work. We can do things in Photoshop and Illustrator, but for this I thought these were the best examples that we could do to teach you some really cool things in Adobe Photoshop. And again, I would love to see what you create. If you've learned anything from any of these courses, any of these classes, I would love you to share it with me. My social media is at It's Dave Clayton. I want to see what you're creating. And don't forget, you can combine all of these things. You could make a graphic, you could put some text in it, you could clip an image inside it. Then you can take that, you can put it in a mock-up and see what it looks like on the side of a building, or in a frame, or maybe on a t-shirt as well. So don't forget, you can layer these effects. In fact, if you took this, put it on a t-shirt mock-up, then take that t-shirt mock-up and put it in a social media graphic and promote your merchandise store. So don't forget, it's all layered, it all works in with each other, and hopefully all of these tips and tricks will make you a better Photoshop user for whatever you want to create. So that's Photoshop wrapped up. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be looking at Adobe InDesign overview, and then we're going to finish the class off where we're going to be making a book from start to finish using some of these assets we've already made. So next time we're going to be moving on to InDesign.